Friends, why was a Hafiz-e-Quran girl married to a snake? What was the reason behind it, and what happened on the very first night of their marriage when the snake did something to the girl? Hearing this story will send shivers down your spine. This incident is both intriguing and mysterious, so I request you to listen to it till the end. This story dates back to old times when a wealthy man lived in a certain place. He was a kind and compassionate person who lacked nothing. He owned immense wealth, properties, mansions, and had many servants. Due to this, he also ruled over his area. However, he had one deficiency. He had no children. To overcome this, he married 3 times, but none of his wives bore him a child. He often wondered what would happen to his wives, his property, and his legacy after his death, fearing how his enemies might treat them and his land. When the wealthy man thought about who would take care of his empire and property after his death, he became deeply troubled. Everyone in the area knew that he longed desperately for a child. He even visited fakirs and saints, offered sheets at shrines of revered figures, and cleaned mosques with his own hands, hoping to fulfill his wish. Despite all his efforts, his heart's desire remained unfulfilled. In the same area lived an astrologer named Barkat, who was exceptionally skilled and well known in his craft. However, he was unfortunate in his personal life and always struggled with poverty. One day, Barkat devised a plan. He dressed in fine clothes and appeared before the wealthy man. Addressing him respectfully, he said, "Sir, I have used my knowledge of astrology to find a solution to your problem. If you marry an 18-year-old girl, she will definitely bear you a child." The wealthy man, intrigued, asked, "Who is this girl and where does she live?" The astrologer replied, "In a neighboring area, there lives an old widow with a single daughter. The girl is exceptionally beautiful, intelligent, and well-mannered." Hearing this, the wealthy man thought, "I've already married 3 times. So what's the harm in marrying once more? It's not like I lack wealth. I only lack a child. Maybe this astrologer is right, and I might finally have an heir to inherit my property. I no doubt drop to real estate agent every day, and my fortune grows larger." The wealthy man then gave Barkat a pearl necklace as a token of appreciation and said, "If Allah blesses me with a child from my 4th wife, I will reward you handsomely and make you rich. But if this turns out to be a lie, I will have you skinned alive and feed your flesh to vultures and crows." The astrologer Barkat assured the wealthy man, saying, "Sir, my life is always at your service. Trust me, none of my predictions have ever been proven wrong. Just marry the widow's daughter once and test my words." In reality, Barkat had made up this entire story to deceive the wealthy man. He was poor and struggling to make ends meet, and he desperately needed money to survive. The widow Barkat mentioned was his own sister, who lived in extreme poverty. Her daughter, a strikingly beautiful young girl, was Barkat's niece. He concocted the plan to marry his niece to the wealthy man so she could inherit his property, and Barkat could benefit financially from the arrangement. A few days later, Barkat successfully orchestrated the marriage between the wealthy man and his niece. After the marriage, the wealthy man treated his new wife with immense respect and love, far beyond what she had ever imagined. The man's 4th wife was named Shanaz. She was aware of her uncle Barkat's manipulative schemes, but kept this knowledge hidden from her husband. Shanaz, having grown up in a humble, poverty-stricken household, was awestruck by the luxurious palaces and wealth of her new husband. She took great interest in exploring her husband's grand estate and enjoyed the newfound privilege and comfort in her life. Though her life had taken a dramatic turn, she ensured her husband remained unaware of her connection to Barkat, maintaining the facade of an ordinary marriage. Shanaz would explore each and every palace, marveling at their grandeur. Once she had seen all the palaces, her husband mentioned one she had yet to visit. "There's an old palace," he said, "far away from the populated areas. It was built by my ancestors and is very ancient. You haven't seen it yet." Hearing this, Shahnaz became excited and insisted on visiting the palace. Her husband assured her, "I'll take you there myself in the morning." The next day, he took her to the old palace. It appeared ancient, with towering, weathered walls and large old trees surrounding it. The place had an aura of mystery. As they walked through the palace, they heard a voice reciting the Quran. Shahnaz asked her husband, "Who is reciting here?" He led her to the room where an elderly, pious man was deeply engrossed in Quranic recitation. The man was known for his devotion to Allah and lived alone in the old palace, spending his days and nights in worship. The elder would occasionally take a walk near the ancient trees and sit beneath them to continue his worship. The trees were massive and had a peculiar, eerie appearance, adding to the palace's mystique. Observing the trees, Shahnaz remarked, "These trees look so strange. Aren't they frightening for the elder?" Her husband replied, "The elder is immersed in his devotion to Allah. Those who have Allah's light in their hearts fear nothing. For them, Allah's presence eliminates all fears. These elders live with complete faith and serenity, untouched by worldly concerns or terrors." Shahnaz listened, captivated by the devotion and tranquility of the elder, as well as the mysterious aura surrounding the palace and its surroundings. The wealthy man continued explaining, "These trees harbor a colony of snakes beneath them. Some of these snakes are so mystical that they even communicate with the pious elder and sometimes take human form." Hearing this, Shahnaz was a little frightened, but didn't let it show. After their visit to the palace, she returned home with her husband. With Shahnaz's marriage, her astrologer uncle Barkat and her impoverished mother, who had lived in hardship for decades, now began to enjoy a life of luxury. Their days were filled with festivities and their nights passed in comfort and indulgence. However, 2 years went by and Shahnaz still did not conceive. The wealthy man, desperate for a child, grew increasingly disheartened. One day, overcome with frustration and anger, the man summoned the astrologer to his palace. When Barkat arrived, the man confronted him, saying, "You are a liar. You made false promises and now you must prepare to face your punishment." Barkat, with his usual cunning demeanor, replied, "Sir, if it pleases you to punish me, I am ready to lay my life at your feet. But I swear by Allah I did not deceive you. Your family's heir, your long-awaited child, will surely be born this year." Hearing this, the man's anger softened, and once again he felt a glimmer of hope. Overjoyed, he gifted Barkat a necklace of pearls. Barkat, clutching the valuable necklace, returned to his elderly sister and instructed her, "Spread the word in the town that my niece Shahnaz, the youngest wife of the wealthy man, is expecting a child." His sister, hesitant, responded, "Spreading this news is easy, but maintaining such a lie will be very difficult. The consequences could be disastrous." Barkat reassured her confidently, "Don't worry, my dear sister. Leave everything to me. I will devise a plan so foolproof that not only will we escape this situation, but we will also secure a life of luxury and comfort. Trust me. Your astrologer brother will take care of everything." The astrologer's elderly sister quickly spread the news that Shahnaz, the youngest wife of the wealthy man, was expecting a child. The town buzzed with the story that this long-awaited child would finally become the heir to the wealthy man's fortune. Overjoyed, the man celebrated by distributing gifts and food to the poor and giving the astrologer many valuable rewards. During one of their meetings, Barkat said to the man, "Sir, there is something I need to tell you. My astrology has revealed an important fact. A beautiful son will be born to you, a prince-like heir. However, the first 14 years of his life will bring you great trials." The wealthy man, puzzled, asked, "What do you mean by that?" Barkat explained, "Your family's heir, your son, must not be seen by anyone except his mother and grandmother. If anyone else lays eyes on him, he will either transform into a ghost or die." The joy that had lit up the man's face instantly faded. His voice faltered as he asked, "Isn't it supposed to be a joyous occasion that my family's heir will finally be born? What kind of condition is this?" Barkat reassured him, "Sir, Isn't it better to have an heir with a restriction than no heir at all? You simply need to follow this condition. When he turns 14, arrange his marriage, but do not attend his wedding procession. Once he is married and returns home with his bride, you can finally see him alongside his wife." Hearing these words, the wealthy man stood frozen, his mind reeling. The Karl Barkat reassured him with his bride, "You can finally see him alongside his wife." Here he thought to himself, "For years, Allah denied me the blessing of a child. Now, when I am about to experience the joy of having an heir, such a strict condition has been imposed." Allah said, "No, the Attorney General believes that children should receive education and sends them to private schools." Days and nights passed in unease and restlessness. The man finally ordered his servants to construct a magnificent palace far away from the populated areas. This palace would serve as the isolated residence for his son and wife, ensuring that no one else could see the child. The wealthy man ordered the construction of a magnificent palace surrounded by a beautiful garden to ensure the proper upbringing of his long-awaited heir. The palace was completed in no time, and it was both grand and secluded. As the time for the child's birth drew closer, the wealthy man's wife, Shehnaz, was moved to this new palace. To ensure the child's safety and prevent any outsider from seeing him, Shehnaz's elderly mother was assigned to take care of both her daughter and the newborn. When the time came and the child was born, the astrologer's sister consulted her brother Barkat. Together they sent a servant to inform the wealthy man of the joyous news that a son had been born to him. The man's happiness knew no bounds. He announced the birth of his heir to the entire kingdom and ordered celebrations in every household. People from all corners of the kingdom rejoiced. The wealthy man distributed sweets generously, organized grand festivities, and arranged for games and performances to entertain the people. He invited pious individuals to pray for the long life of his son, seeking blessings for his future. For days, food was served to the poor, and the needs of many were fulfilled. Prisoners were pardoned and released, and officials were promoted and rewarded for their service. Amidst all the celebrations, Barkat stood back, watching with pride. He felt triumphant in his cunning and manipulation, marveling at how effortlessly he had deceived the wealthiest man in the region. For Barkat, his scheming had not only secured his family's fortune, but also brought him immense satisfaction in executing his plans so flawlessly. Barkat, the astrologer, relished his success and, feeling triumphant, said to his sister and niece, "You can enjoy a luxurious life for the next 14 years. After that, if the wealthy man is still alive, I will come up with another scheme." Barkat frequently took items or favors from Shehnaz, his niece. Whenever he needed something specific, he would ask Shehnaz to get it from her husband. By now, he had freed himself from the clutches of poverty and was living a comfortable life. Shehnaz and her elderly mother occasionally visited the wealthy man in his main palace. They would tell him many fabricated stories about his son Ali, who did not actually exist, described him as handsome and intelligent, recounting tales of his beauty and charm with great enthusiasm. The wealthy man listened to these stories with a mix of joy and longing, often sighing deeply as he imagined his son. However, he was bound by the condition that he could not see Ali. Years passed this way, with the wealthy man continuing to dream about his son. As the 14 years prophesied by Barkat neared completion, the wealthy man began to think about arranging his son's marriage. He approached Barkat for advice, asking about the marriage. Barkat replied, "Sir, there are no restrictions on who your son can marry. You can choose any girl for him." The wealthy man then thought, "Why not seek guidance from the pious elder in my old palace?" He decided to visit the elder for counsel. Accompanied by 2 of his servants, the wealthy man journeyed to his ancestral palace and sought an audience with the devout elder. At that time, the elder was deeply engrossed in worship. The atmosphere of the old palace was serene and spiritual, adding to the wealthy man's anticipation as he prepared to seek the elder's guidance on this crucial matter. The pious elder sat under an ancient tree, deeply immersed in worship. When the wealthy man approached, he respectfully asked, "You devote your days and nights to Allah's worship. Can you recommend a suitable girl for my son Ali so I can arrange his marriage?" The elder listened to the man's request and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "You claim to have a son, but you have no first-hand knowledge of him. How can I advise you on who to marry him to?" The wealthy man replied confidently, "Don't worry about that. My son Ali will soon be revealed to everyone." After reflecting for a moment, the elder said, "If that is the case, marry your son to a girl who is a Hafiz-e-Quran, devout, prays 5 times a day, and is pious in her ways." The man left the elder satisfied with this advice. However, hidden behind the old tree, a black snake was slithering and listening intently to the entire conversation. The snake had been observing the wealthy man and the elder closely. With the advice in mind, the wealthy man, despite his luxurious lifestyle and high social connections, began searching for a modest, pious girl. After much effort, he finally found a girl who was a Hafiz-e-Quran, the daughter of a poor widow. She was virtuous and deeply religious, fitting the elder's description perfectly. The wealthy man arranged for his son Ali's marriage to this girl, and a date was set for the wedding. However, as per the strange condition that no one could see Ali, his mother and grandmother took responsibility for dressing him as the groom. They ensured that his appearance remained concealed from everyone. Preparations for the wedding were underway in the wealthy man's palace. The wedding procession was set to depart for the bride's modest home, and excitement filled the air. Meanwhile, the mysterious black snake seemed to be watching and waiting, its presence adding an ominous undertone to the unfolding events. As the time for the wedding procession approached, the astrologer's elderly sister anxiously confronted her brother, saying, "The time has come for the procession to leave, but where will we produce a groom now?" Barkat, ever the schemer, replied calmly, "My dear sister, you've enjoyed a life of luxury and comfort in this palace for many years. Now, it's time for you to endure this trouble as well. As for me, I will quietly disappear." Hearing this, the ground beneath the old woman's feet seemed to vanish. Panicked, she exclaimed, "Oh no! The wealthy man will have us torn apart and fed to vultures and crows." "Oh, wretch, are you throwing us into hell without a shred of shame?" Barkat, unbothered, said mockingly, "Look, sister, I've kept you in a heaven of comfort all this time, and now this is the gratitude you're showing me? How ungrateful you are!" His sister, trembling with anger and fear, retorted, "Mark my words, if you abandon us like this, you will never be forgiven. You're leaving us in the jungle to be devoured by lions." Meanwhile, Shanaz, the wealthy man's wife, overheard the argument and began crying uncontrollably, clinging to her mother. Both mother and daughter wept in despair, lamenting their inevitable doom. Barkat, watching their distress, alternated between laughing and humming to himself, as if enjoying the spectacle. When the mother and daughter's cries subsided into sobs and hiccups, Barkat finally spoke, saying with a sly grin, "Listen carefully." Barkat, trying to calm his sister and niece, he said, "Crying won't solve anything. Come with me, and I'll show you what we need to do next." Hearing this, hope returned to their hearts, and they followed him to another room. Once there, Barkat revealed a statue he had prepared, a lifelike figure resembling a 14-year-old boy. He said, "Look at this. I've had this statue made to look like your so-called son, Ali. Place it in the palanquin, and during the wedding procession, keep it hidden. When the procession halts at night, both of you stay away from the palanquin. At dawn, spread the story that someone secretly looked at Ali during the night, and that's why he turned into this statue. This way, we'll escape suspicion. This way, we'll escape suspicion." The old woman understood Barkat's plan and happily prepared the statue. She dressed it in a wedding outfit, adorned it with flowers and jewelry, and placed it carefully inside the palanquin. Once everything was set, she joined the palanquin herself and called the servants to lift it. Outside, the wedding procession was in full swing, with loud fireworks lighting up the sky. The festivities attracted two snakes who slithered out from the shadows to watch. Following the procession were soldiers and guards mounted on elephants, adding grandeur to the event. The lively procession continued with great enthusiasm until it reached a predetermined spot for the night. Upon arrival, everyone feasted and celebrated before retiring for the night. The old woman ordered the palanquin to be placed under a large shisham tree, instructing everyone to stay away, saying, "Ali needs fresh air, and no one must come near the palanquin. If anyone sees him, they will bear the consequences." With these warnings, the guests moved away, and the old woman quietly slipped into a nearby chamber to rest. In those days, it was believed that snakes, upon reaching 100 years of age, could transform their shapes and even speak like humans. The two snakes who had followed the procession from the old palace climbed the shisham tree and began conversing. The male snake said to the female, "Did you see this wedding procession?" "What?" The female snake replied, "Yes, I saw it." The male snake said, "This procession is a sham. The groom in the palanquin is nothing but a statue. That old woman will start crying in the morning, claiming someone looked at the groom and turned him into a statue. This entire deceit is a web of lies and manipulation." Their hissing conversation continued, revealing the truth about Barkat's deception and the false narrative being spun around the supposed son, Ali. The male snake, after contemplating for a while, responded to the female snake, "Yes, this entire deceit is the doing of that astrologer. If things continue like this, the truth will eventually come out, and when the wealthy man learns he has no son, the shock will kill him." The female snake asked, "Has the wealthy man never seen his son?" The male snake replied, "That's the core of their deception. The wealthy man doesn't even know that he never fathered a son. All of this is a web of lies spun by the astrologer and his accomplices." Feeling pity for the wealthy man, the female snake said, "This is a cruel game. The wealthy man doesn't deserve to lose his life over this treachery." After some thought, the male snake proposed, "I could save his life. I will take the form of a 14-year-old boy and sit in the palanquin as the groom." The female snake hesitated. "But what if the old woman sees you? How will you convince her that you are Ali?" The male snake confidently replied, "The old woman has already concocted so many lies. When she sees a living boy in the palanquin, she'll be shocked. If she questions me, I'll tell her, 'If you're truthful, then show me the real Ali. Where is he?' That will leave her speechless." End. The female snake, still doubtful, asked, "That's fine, but what will you do afterward?" The male snake smiled slyly. "I'll play the role of the groom, marry the bride, and take her away with me. After a week, I'll return to you." The female snake, moved by the wealthy man's plight, reluctantly agreed, but set a condition. "You may go, but you must return to me within a week." The male snake promised, "I'll definitely return." With that, he transformed into a handsome 14-year-old boy, climbed into the palanquin, and tossed the statue into the bushes. The next morning, the old woman emerged from her chamber, ready to execute her deceitful plan. She approached the palanquin and lifted its curtain, expecting to see the statue. Instead, she saw a living, handsome boy seated inside. Startled and confused, she exclaimed, "Who are you?" The snake boy smiled and calmly replied, "Don't you know? I am the groom of this procession. Why are you so concerned?" The old woman, utterly shocked and at a loss for words, stood frozen as the unexpected turn of events began to unravel her carefully crafted lies. The old woman, relieved by the sudden turn of events, said, "You were about to take the wedding procession without a groom, and now by Allah's grace you have a living, healthy groom. Be thankful for this blessing." After thinking for a moment, she decided, "Let this boy remain the groom. My lie will stay intact." The procession finally arrived at the door of the poor Hafiz-e-Quran girl's house. On the first day, the wedding guests were hosted with simple hospitality. On the second day, the nikah ceremony was performed. The widow, according to her humble means, gave her daughter a few clothes and small gifts as her dowry. With all the celebrations complete, the bride left with the groom, and the wedding procession returned to the wealthy man's palace in great splendor. The wealthy man, who had spent 14 long years in anticipation, was overwhelmed with emotions. The day he had longed for had finally arrived. He eagerly awaited the procession's arrival, his heart racing with excitement. When the palanquin reached the palace gates, he rushed forward, lifted the curtain, and embraced his son. He kissed his forehead, caressed his face, and admired him for a long time, unable to contain his joy. His heart swelled with happiness, and he wished never to let his son out of his sight again. The wealthy man celebrated the arrival of his son and daughter-in-law with grand festivities. He spared no expense, decorating the palace so extravagantly that everyone who saw it was left in awe. He assigned numerous servants and maids to care for his son and daughter-in-law, ensuring their every need was met. Meanwhile, the snake, living as a human groom, became mesmerized by the luxurious life of humans. The comfort and opulence made him forget his past life. When thoughts of his snake wife came to mind, he brushed them aside, reasoning that she would manage somehow. On the other hand, the female snake, who had waited patiently for her husband, grew tired of waiting. Determined to find him and remind him of his promise, she decided to venture into the human world. Gathering her fellow snakes, she shared her plight and sought their blessing to embark on her journey. After bidding farewell to her kin, the snake wife began her search. She wandered through forests and searched tirelessly for many days, determined to locate her husband. Eventually, she found herself at the grand palace where the snake groom resided. Hiding in the garden during the day, she waited for nightfall. As darkness descended, she approached the palace gates, but, entering the palace, posed a challenge. The snake wife found all entrances to the palace blocked. Frustrated and with no way to enter, she hid in the garden, waiting for an opportunity. The next morning, as a servant opened the palace gates, she seized the moment and slipped inside. However, one of the servants spotted her and shouted, "Snake! Snake!" in alarm. Chaos ensued as more servants rushed to the scene and surrounded the snake. Furious and desperate, the snake lashed out and bit 2 servants. But alone, she stood no chance against the group of palace attendants. They overpowered her, striking her down and crushing her head. Moments later, Ali emerged from his room, disturbed by the commotion. "What is this uproar so early in the morning?" he demanded. A servant respectfully bowed and explained, "Sir, a snake entered the palace from the garden. It bit 2 of us, but we managed to kill it." Hearing this, Ali rushed to see the lifeless snake. When he recognized her as his snake wife, tears welled up in his eyes. Overcome with grief and guilt for breaking his promise to her, Ali wept bitterly. His bride and his father noticed his sorrow and questioned him, but he remained silent, unable to share the truth. Unable to bear the weight of his emotions, Ali left the palace and crawled his way to the pious elder. Transforming back into his snake form, he confessed, "My wife, the snake, has died." You know that if one of a pair of snakes is killed, the other seeks vengeance. But if I take revenge on the servants or the wealthy man, they will discover my true identity, that I am a snake, not his son. The elder, wise and composed, replied, "I have known all along that you are not human, and that the wealthy man has no real son. You cannot continue lying to the Hafiz-e-Quran girl you married. One day you must reveal the truth to her. Do not grieve for the dead. Those who leave this world are no longer bound to anyone, even their own children. If you return to your snake life, your new bride will suffer endlessly, and her grief will destroy her. The day your truth is revealed, you must bid farewell to the world of snakes forever." The elder continued, "Your wife is pure and pious, and her life now depends on you. You must decide whether to live truthfully as her husband in the human world or return to your life as a snake. But remember, a lie cannot last forever, and the truth will eventually come to light. The snake, after listening to the elder's wise words, returned to the palace, determined to maintain his current life. However, a new worry began to haunt him. What if my kin find out about the death of my snake wife? They will consider my human wife her killer and will undoubtedly take revenge on her someday. This thought left him restless. After much contemplation, he approached his wife and said, "I want to give you some advice. Always remember and follow these instructions." His wife, curious and attentive, replied, "Tell me, and I promise to follow them always." "Why?" The snake, disguised as her husband, said, "Avoid wearing glass bangles, eating pea pods, drinking milk directly from a milkmaid, and adorning yourself with flower garlands. These things are not a part of our tradition, so stay away from them." His wife agreed wholeheartedly, saying, "You can trust me. I will remember your advice and stay away from these things." A few days later, a bangle seller came to the palace. He praised her glass bangles, saying, "These are the most beautiful bangles you'll ever see." The wife admired the bangles and said, "These are indeed beautiful, but I cannot wear them. Wearing glass bangles is not a part of our tradition." Hearing this, the bangle seller was surprised and asked, "If wearing glass bangles is against your tradition, then why don't you ask your husband what his true lineage is?" That evening, the wife asked her husband, "Can you tell me what is your lineage?" The snake man replied sternly, "Do not try to learn about my lineage. If you do, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Hearing this, his wife grew silent, though curiosity lingered in her mind. A few days later, a flower seller arrived at the palace with garlands and pea pods, praising their quality. The wife admired them but declined, saying, "Wearing flower garlands and eating pea pods are against our tradition." The flower seller, much like the bangle seller, found this unusual and questioned, "If these things are against your tradition, perhaps you should ask your husband about his background. Maybe he's hiding something from you." Though the wife brushed off the seller's words, they deepened her curiosity and unease about her husband's mysterious identity. The flower seller, surprised by the wife's words, said, "If wearing flower garlands and eating pea pods are not part of your tradition, then you should ask your husband about his lineage. Something seems unusual here." This remark further unsettled the Hafiz-e-Quran wife, and she grew increasingly curious about her husband's mysterious identity. That night, she confronted her husband again. "Why won't you tell me your lineage? Today I insist on knowing." The snake man sighed deeply and replied, "Do not ask about my lineage. If you do, you will regret it and suffer great loss." Undeterred, she said, "No matter the cost, I need to know the truth." Feeling trapped and deeply worried, the snake man finally relented and said, "If you are so insistent, then tomorrow morning accompany me to the old palace far away from here. There I will reveal my true identity." The wife reluctantly agreed, and they both endured a restless night. Early the next morning, they set out for the abandoned palace. Upon reaching the place, which was shrouded in mystery, her husband turned to her and said one last time, "I beg you, do not force me to reveal my identity. You will regret it more than you can imagine." But the wife remained firm. "No," she said, "I must know the truth." Accepting her determination, the snake man led her to a large, ancient tree with thick foliage. At the base of the tree were small and large holes leading into the earth. He turned to her and said, "This is the place where I will reveal my identity. But remember, this is your final chance to change your mind." He began to remove his clothes and stood near one of the holes. Once again he said, "I warn you, asking about my lineage will bring great sorrow. You still have time to stop this." But his wife, now trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity, insisted, "No, I will know the truth today, no matter what." The Hafiz-e-Quran girl's husband, now a snake, reluctantly transformed in front of her. His body slithered to the ground, and she watched in horror as the man she called her husband became a black serpent. Her heart raced with fear, but amidst her terror, a thought surfaced. No matter what, he is my husband, and I must not abandon him. She tried to grab him as he slithered away, but he quickly darted into one of the holes near the ancient tree and disappeared. Devastated, she fell to the ground, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her world crumbled as she realized the consequences of her insistence on knowing his true identity. Regret and sorrow consumed her as she wandered aimlessly around the old palace, searching for her husband. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered his name, hoping he would return. Why didn't I listen to him? Why did I insist on knowing his lineage when he warned me not to? These thoughts tormented her as she stumbled through unfamiliar paths. Eventually, she came across a small house. Exhausted and desperate, she entered. It wasn't a large house, and she quickly moved to the other side where a faint blue light illuminated the area. She rested briefly, catching her breath, and then resumed her search, determined to find her husband. Her thoughts spiraled into fear. Where could he have gone? Will I ever find him? What if I never do? These questions gnawed at her as she wandered further into the unknown. Finally, she reached a well. Sitting near the edge were several beautiful girls, repeatedly drawing water. Their appearance was striking, but their eyes held an eerie quality. Their voices were sweet and melodic, but none of them wore bangles or jewelry. They glanced at the Hafiz-e-Quran girl, but said nothing, continuing to fetch water. Unable to hold back her curiosity, the girl eventually asked, "Huh? Why are you all drawing so much water? Where are you taking it?" One of the girls replied with a gentle smile, "Our uncle, who had taken the form of a human and lived among them, has returned after a long time. He is resting now, and we are fetching water to prepare for his stay." Hearing this, the Hafiz-e-Quran girl's heart skipped a beat. Could this uncle be my husband? She thought, her hope rekindled. She resolved to follow them and uncover the truth about their uncle, desperate to reunite with her lost love. The girls continued pouring water over their uncle, scrubbing him with fragrant soaps and sprinkling a tar to remove any lingering human scent. Meanwhile, the Hafiz-e-Quran girl, now convinced that this uncle was her husband, quietly slipped off her ring and dropped it into one of the pitchers of water being carried by the girls. As the snakeman lay on a stone, indulging in the pampering of his kin, the girls took turns pouring water on him. When his niece poured water from her pitcher, the ring fell onto the stone in front of him. He immediately recognized it as his wife's ring. His heart sank, and he asked his niece, "How did this ring get into your pitcher?" The girl, equally surprised, said, "I have no idea how this ring got into my water." Surprised, he said, and the snake man asked, "Was there any woman near the well?" All the girls answered in unison, "Yes, there was a woman sitting by the well. She looked very tired, her face was pale, and tears were streaming down her cheeks." Hearing this, the snake man's heart filled with guilt and sorrow. He thought to himself, "My wife has followed me all the way here. She must have endured so much pain and heartbreak in search of me," he realized. "She now knows my true identity, yet she still came for me. She is truly loyal and devoted, a reflection of her Hafiz-e-Quran character. And here I am, a heartless being who abandoned her." Moved by his thoughts, he stood up from the stone, dressed quickly, and ran toward the well. There he saw his wife sitting beside the well, lost in deep thought. Her face was pale and her eyes red from crying. The sight of her broke his heart. Overcome with emotion, he immediately transformed into his human form and stood before her. When the Hafiz-e-Quran girl saw her husband in his human form, her large, tear-filled eyes widened. Tears began to flow freely down her cheeks as she gazed at him in silence, her love and longing evident. The snakeman, now deeply repentant, said, "My dear wife, I thought you were stubborn, which is why I left you. But now, I've seen your heart and realized how much you love me. You have endured so much for me. and I can see now that you truly care for me more than anyone ever could." He continued, "Forgive me for leaving you and causing you pain. I promise that I will never abandon you again. Let us return to our life together, and I will dedicate myself to your happiness." The girl, overwhelmed with emotion, nodded silently, her tears speaking more than words ever could. Together they began their journey back, leaving behind the world of snakes and stepping toward a future built on trust, understanding, and love. The Hafiz-e-Quran girl gazed at her husband with thirsty eyes. Her lips quivered slightly, but she couldn't utter a single word. Finally, her husband stepped forward, gently held her shoulders, and said, "Get up, my dear. Come with me to my kin. I will share your story with them. Perhaps they will take pity on us and allow me to stay with you." Hearing this, a faint smile spread across her dry lips. Without a second thought for her own safety, she placed her trust in her husband, even though she knew his kin might see her as an enemy and harm her. Holding his hand tightly, she followed him without hesitation. As they walked, her husband recounted everything: the deceit of the astrologer Barkat, how he tricked the wealthy man with the fake wedding procession, and how he, a snake, had taken on the form of Ali to sit in the palanquin. He revealed that when his snake wife entered the palace, she was killed by the servants, which was the reason for his sorrow. He also explained why he had warned her against certain items like glass bangles, flower garlands, and pea pods, as they were signals to his snake kin, particularly the snake women like the milkmaid and the flower seller, who had come to test and harm her. Hearing this, she was shocked and speechless, but she remained silent, processing the enormity of what she had just learned. When they finally reached his kin, he addressed them openly. "When I married this woman, she didn't know I was a snake. Even when she discovered the truth, she continued to love me as she did before. She followed me here, enduring countless hardships, and her devotion has moved me deeply. I ask for your permission to live with her." He added, "My snake wife is no more, and loneliness has become unbearable for me. Having lived among humans, I've come to realize that even humans can be loyal and loving. I wish to return to her world and live as her husband." His kin listened intently, some moved by his words and others skeptical. The gathering grew tense as they deliberated on his plea. Would his kin allow him to leave their world and embrace his life as a human, or would their anger overrule his desires? The snake addressed his kin with sincerity, saying, "As you all know, outside the old palace near the tree, there lives a pious elder who is always engaged in worship. He is human, yet he has seen us many times and never caused us harm. He told me that if I were to marry a Hafiz-e girl, I could live in the human world permanently. My wife, Alhamdulillah, is a Hafiz-e girl. If I go to live with her, both our lives will be filled with happiness, and I will no longer have to endure loneliness." Hearing this, the snakekin were moved. They said, "We are proud of your loyalty and determination. Seeing your devotion, we willingly give you our blessing. Go, live with your human wife, and lead a happy life in the human world." Overjoyed, the snake man and his wife left the snake world and returned to the old palace. There they went to the pious elder and shared their story with him. The elder, wise and compassionate, said, "Now that your kin have blessed your union, you must reveal the truth to the wealthy man who raised you as his son." Why didn't he? Only then will your life be free of lies and deceit. The couple agreed and returned to the wealthy man's palace. When they arrived, everyone was overjoyed to see them, especially the wealthy man, who had been deeply grieving their absence. His despair had often caused him to faint, but the sight of Ali and his wife filled him with new life. He rose from his bed, embraced them both, and wept tears of relief and happiness. After some time, the man asked Ali, "Where have you been all these days?" The snake man, now fully committed to honesty, sat down and narrated the entire story. He revealed every truth: how the astrologer Barkat had deceived him, how the palanquin carried a snake instead of a groom, and how he had lived as Ali among humans. The wealthy man was stunned, realizing how Barkat, his sister and niece, had been fooling him for so many years, exploiting his desperate desire for an heir. His body trembled with rage as he shouted for Barkat and his accomplices to be brought before him. When they arrived, trembling with fear, the wealthy man declared, "These deceivers who dared to trick the wealthiest man in the land deserve no mercy. If they can betray me, they can cheat anyone. I order that they be hanged at once for their treachery." Barkat and his sister begged for forgiveness, pleading with the wealthy man to spare their lives. But the man, unwilling to show leniency to those who had caused him such pain and humiliation, ensured justice was served. Barkat and his sister were sentenced to death, bringing an end to their manipulative schemes. The snake man and his wife lived happily together in the palace, their love strengthened by the trials they had endured. The wealthy man, though saddened by the years of deceit, found solace in their happiness and in knowing that honesty and loyalty had prevailed in the end. The astrologer Barkat and his sister begged desperately for forgiveness, but the wealthy man refused to listen. He ordered his servants to take them away immediately, and the next day the two schemers were executed for their deceit. The wealthy man also sentenced his wife Shanaz to life imprisonment for her betrayal. Despite being his wife, she had hidden the truth and supported her mother and uncle in their manipulative schemes. After delivering justice, the wealthy man fell into deep sorrow and regret, struggling to come to terms with the years of deception. Meanwhile, the snake, who had lived as Ali, felt responsible for the wealthy man's misery. He approached him humbly and said, "You now know the truth about me. If you allow, I will leave this place with my wife and start a new life elsewhere." The wealthy man, visibly emotional, stared at him for a while and then said, "Whether you are human or a snake doesn't matter to me. I have always seen you as my son, and even now, I look at you the same way. You have never given me a reason to doubt you, and I cannot bear the thought of being separated from you." Hearing these words, the snake, deeply moved, lowered his head in respect. The wealthy man's heartfelt words touched him profoundly. He responded, "Father, I hold you in the highest regard and have always respected you from the depths of my heart. Perhaps Allah brought me into your life as a son because you had no children of your own. Outside this palace, the world believes I am your son, and I wish to continue being so." The wealthy man, tears streaming down his face, embraced him and said, "Yes, my son, you are and always will be my son. After my death, you will inherit everything, my property, my legacy, and my name." The snake too began to weep, and overwhelmed with emotion, kissed the wealthy man's hands. "Father, from this day on, I am your son, and you are my father," he said. From that moment on, they lived together in peace and happiness, forging a bond of love and trust stronger than anything that had come before. Moral of the story: love holds immense power, whether it's between humans or even with creatures of the wild. A heart filled with love and sincerity can melt even the hardest of souls. If you like this story, don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel, African Tales 2.0, and become part of our family. Thank you.